say after that? What a darn thing, that was so beautiful. Oh, I do love the creativity of the universe. I mean, I guess that's why it's called creation. And I love the many ways that we humans joyfully find meaning in our relationships. Like, I learned the other day of a group of women who call themselves the Butt Dust Sisters, which at first sounds like a terrible name for a group, more suited perhaps for a grunge band. But then I learned why they chose that name. There are several places in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, and likely in other texts as well, that tell us that humans are but dust and ashes. From ashes to ashes and dust to dust, we are but dust. And hence, for this group of women who gather to share their life's journeys, the Butt Dust Sisters is perfectly fitting. It's a name with a powerful reminder. We come from the earth and we return to the earth. We are never separate from it. And yet, as we know, Western culture actively works to separate us from this connection and this reality. Paving over landscapes, putting animals and forests into demarcated preserves, building bigger and stronger, powerful tools to try to control the environment, and even suggesting that there are qualitative differences between city dwellers and rural folks. Country, for some, is a pejorative. Our human interventions have so very clearly changed the landscape and our relationship to it. And along with these changes, I fear it has also changed our ability to listen to the land. Now, before I get too deep into this, I want to be fully transparent. You see, I feel quite inadequate to talk about listening to the land. I'm well aware of my shortcomings when it comes to being a good nature lover. The last car I purchased depends on fossil fuels. I drink soda from plastic bottles. My first impulse, even on a beautiful day, is not necessarily to go outside. I've been to a few climate demonstrations, but could have been to many more. There are so many ways I could better listen to the land and to live in ways that are less harmful. And yet, guilt and shame are impediments to change and growth, and I'll not let them stop me from learning alongside you, with you. As a people, we too often have debates about the impact of our human actions taken in the name of progress. But for good or for ill, we are where we are right now. And I think we need to have a different kind of discussion, because there's no question that human actions have impacted the earth and created unprecedented climate change. The size and scope of Hurricane Milton this last week was a powerful example, and to my thinking, evidence of harmful human impact that's impossible to refute, though many will try. Milton and Helene were also clear indications that nature will prevail. Earth is more powerful than any of us. It will most likely outsurvive human civilization, although the projectile of its future is unquestionably being changed by our existence here. So the conversation I'd rather have, and the learning I want to lean into, is about how we can coexist more harmoniously with the land we live upon, and in so doing, to improve the relatively short lives we share here together with the earth and with all life forms. Rather than fighting against nature to assert control, rather than trying to get a stone to speak our language, rather than ignoring the impact of my personal actions and choices, I want to live so that we can work together reparatively for a better future for all beings, sentient and non-sentient, on this, it's our only home, the earth. Working reparatively with is to understand that the land and the water, the trees, the animals, they have a voice. And if we listen, they can be heard. Did you know that a few years ago, I think it was about 2017, rivers in New Zealand and India and Colombia were given legal rights to be granted the status of persons? Rivers were given legal rights. Such rights for the water to speak have come as a result of groundbreaking agreements or settlements with Indigenous peoples and our acknowledgement that the land, the water, will speak to us if we but listen, and that they have something to say. So how do we have that kind of conversation? The one about living and working together reparatively for a better future for all. I have to think that it begins with and is completely dependent on and inseparable from our ability to listen to the land, to know it, to connect with it, to get into relationship with it, to not see ourselves as separate from it. And who better to teach us than those peoples who've been listening to the land for millennia? Now, I do not mean to say that Indigenous people are responsible to teach us, those of us who are non-Indigenous, or that we should expect it from them. As a person of immigrant heritage, I know that I need to earn that right and the opportunity to learn from their teachings by building relationships. Still, many do generously share their knowledge through such things as books and podcasts and workshops. And those of us who are not Indigenous to this place can access important teachings in this way. Right now, I'm on my second pass through Tyson Yunkaporta's book, Sand Talk, How Indigenous Thinking Can Save the World. Now, Yunkaporta is Indigenous to Australia. The worldview he shares is both unique to that place and deeply compelling. He writes, "Many of us have been displaced from cultures of origin, a global diaspora of refugees severed not only from the land, but from the sheer genius that comes from belonging in symbiotic relationship to it. In Aboriginal Australia, our elders tell us stories, ancient narratives to show us that if you don't move with the land will move you. There's a pattern to the universe and everything in it, and there are knowledge systems and traditions that follow this pattern to maintain balance. But recent traditions have emerged that break down creation systems like a virus, exercising a civilizing control over what some see as chaos. The Sumerians started it, the Romans perfected it, the Anglosphere inherited it. The world is now mired in it," unquote. And from this introduction, he goes on to share stories and tales that teach and reaffirm that reality that we can live in symbiotic relation to the land. And one such story talks about stones and about how his culture tells of Uluru, a stone at the center of their continent's creation story. Now, this story and its teaching leads to a humble knowing that there's no difference between you or me, a stone or a tree or a traffic light. And so, Yunkaporta says we need to begin by examining rocks who have learned things over deep time, because somehow, patiently sitting a while with rocks, we learn that we are not greater than anyone or anything else, and they are not greater than us. We're no greater or less than a rock. And coming to the realization that we, be that human, sentient, white, or any other combination thereof, if we come to realize that we are not that special, we could finally be happy. We don't teach the stones, they teach us, if we listen. So there are two layers to my reflection today. One is that in listening to the land and building a better relationship with it, we humans will do less harm. The other is that in listening to the land, we ourselves will be changed and could internalize our deep but dust oneness with the earth itself. And that in so doing, we would know our true worth and our inherent belonging here, together here. I have vivid memories of observing an Anishinaabe ceremony at the petroglyphs, where a respectful group of elders and others quietly spend time on that huge rock face. a bit of singing and drumming, but mostly quietly listening. Now, observing ceremony meant to stand on the outside. Non-Indigenous people aren't actually allowed on the petroglyphs. Observing ceremony was not participating, and yet even from a distance I could sense the communion with the natural world that they felt and lived, and I began to suspect that this communion is also always accessible to all of us, whoever we are. So again, listen to the land. We would do well to go out and be with rocks, the rocks that surround us in this place, and the trees and the grass, to just be quiet and patient and listen, Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. Robin Wall Kimmerer, in her beautiful book, Braiding Sweetgrass, wrote that immigrants, by definition, cannot be Indigenous. Indigenous is a birthright word. She writes there of indigeneity as being that of having a soul-deep fusion with the land. Quote, maybe the task assigned to second man, I think that's us, is to strive to become naturalized to a place, to throw off the mindset of the immigrant. Being naturalized to place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized is to know that your ancestors lie in this ground. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's future matters. To take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all our relatives depend on it, because they do, unquote. To live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you live and you drink. To come to know the place we're rooted, to become deeply, inextricably naturalized, listening as if our lives depend on it, because they do. How can we each become naturalized to this place? How can we cultivate our relationships to this place, to home and to community? What would it mean for us to work and act from a sense of deep home? What would it take for us to take care of the land and our community as if our lives depended on it? In an interview, Kimmerer took this a bit further, saying, how do we belong to a place? How do we live as if our ancestors' dust was in this soil? How do we live as if our great-grandchildren will live here? What I really mean is, how do we invest in a place and care for that place just as it cares for us? And to me, that's becoming native to place, or even thinking about being botanically naturalized to place, to belong in that space. And that comes, I think, with the give and take. To be gifted with the gifts of that place, and to then return your gifts to that place. And wherever I've lived, that has, for me, helped me feel at home as if I belonged there, unquote. Those of us who come from immigrant histories cannot claim being Indigenous to this land, but we can become naturalized to it by listening more and more, and then becoming aware of the many gifts it offers us, by returning our own gifts. And in so doing, we can deepen our connection to the land, this symbiotic relationship, and our place with it, on it, because of it. And then can we belong? By listening, we can know true belonging. The poet and author Wendell Berry, who is not Indigenous but who lives on the land, wrote a beautiful piece called "This Place That You Belong To." I offer you a few excerpts. It is hard to have hope because we have not made our lives to fit our places. The forests are ruined, the fields eroded, the streams polluted, the mountains overturned. Hope, then, to belong to your place by your own knowledge of what it is that no other place is, and by your caring for it as you care for no other place, this place that you belong to, though it's not yours, for it was from the beginning and it will be to the end. Belong to your place by the knowledge of the others who are your neighbors in it, Answer with knowledge of the others who are here and how to be here with them. By this knowledge, make the sense you need to make. Speak to your fellow humans as your place has taught you to speak, as it has spoken to you. Listen privately, silently to the voices that rise up from the pages of books and from your own heart. Be still and listen to the voices that belong to the stream banks and the trees and the open fields. There are songs and sayings that belong to this place by which it speaks for itself and no other. Found your hope then on the ground under your feet. No place at last is better than the world, and the world is no better than its places. Ashes to ashes, we are all but dust. Deeply, inextricably part of the land, just as the land is part of us. May we listen to its ancient voice, so that as Neruda hoped, without rush, without engines, we would all be together in a sudden strangeness. And in that moment, we could begin the healing of the earth.